Hey, this is Jen from Midnight Sky Fibers, and I'm here today to tell you about bulky weight yarn. For those of you who don't know me, I run Midnight Sky Fibers, which is a natural dye studio in Seattle, Washington, where I make naturally dyed yarn and fiber that uses only natural dyes and non-toxic mordants. So, bulky yarn. Bulky yarn, especially hand-spun bulky yarn, is great for quick fall projects and winter projects where you need quick gifts or whether you want a nice thick hat for yourself. The best part about bulky yarn is that it tends to knit up very quickly, but it's a little bit easier to work with than the super chunky or super bulky yarns. So now I'm going to show you a couple examples of bulky yarn. So this is a single ply bulky yarn. It's thick, but it's not so thick that it's hard to work with. It'll still fit on through a standard ball winder. You can use like size 8 to 10 needles on it. It works well with a variety of commercial knitting patterns out there. So it makes it fairly easy to substitute different yarns. There's a lot of single ply yarns out there that are available to bulky, both commercially and from different hand spinners. So here's another example of a bulky yarn. This one's 2-ply. These are of course all hand spun and naturally dyed, because that's what I make. This is a 2-ply yarn that has a lot of great texture to it. This is the sort of yarn that you would use either for anything from a felting project to a funky hat. It's great because it doesn't have anything sticking out of it. It's not coils. It doesn't have a lot of thicker sections. So for people who are beginning knitters, 2-ply yarns are great because they're not going to unravel on you. They're not going to get too twisted, and they're really quite easy to work with. So then let's compare this to an example of what would be classified as a super bulky yarn. You can see it's not too different, but it has some really thick coils in it. And then compared to a DK weight yarn, you can see that this one is a lot thinner. It's still just 2 plies. They're both wool, except this one's a lot more sparkly because it has some sparkle in it. So you can see that this it's still very squishy. You know, both are squishy, but the bulky yarn is going to be a lot better for knitting a faster project. I always tell most of my students when they're just learning to knit that they want to use a worsted weight or a bulky weight yarn. Anything thinner is going to take them too long before they see a finished result for a project, and anything thicker is going to require knitting needles that are just too hard for people who are just starting out to hold. Most of the projects that people tell me about that they've made from bulky weight handspun yarns is hats. I have a bunch of them up on my website that take anywhere from just 50 to 75 yards of yarn. And the really great thing about bulky weight yarns is just the huge variety of them out there that people are making. Bulky weight yarn is probably the default yarn that most people spin for sale commercially, so there's everything out there, every blend that you can imagine, every color that you can imagine. It can be as crazy and funky and sparkly as you want, or it can be very simple, like this nice olive naturally dyed yarn here. So just the huge variety available makes it great for people knitting just such a wonderful variety of projects. Thanks for listening.